The sun hung low over the Mesa, Arizona horizon, painting the sky in streaks of orange and pink as I stood on the porch of my grandfather's old cabin, a chipped coffee mug in hand. The air was dry, carrying the faint scent of desert sage and dust, and for a moment, everything felt right. This was my new beginning, a chance to leave behind the chaos of my past and build something solid, something real. I'd just inherited this 102-acre ranch from my grandfather, a man who'd lived his life by a code of freedom and grit, and I was determined to honor that. The land stretched out before me, rugged and untamed, dotted with cacti and gnarled oaks, a stark contrast to the cookie-cutter sprawl of the Creekstone Trails development just beyond my fence line. That's where the trouble started, though I didn't know it yet. I'm Joshua Granger, a Marine vet fresh out of service, still figuring out how to fit into a world that didn't run on orders and adrenaline. My time in the Corps had left me with scars, some you could see, most you couldn't, and a bank account with just enough to keep me afloat while I sorted out my next move. Civilian life was a puzzle I hadn't cracked. Denver, where I'd been crashing with a buddy after my discharge, felt like a cage too loud, too crowded, too disconnected. So when Grandpa's lawyer called, telling me I was the sole heir to his ranch, it was like a lifeline. I packed my gear, loaded up my 2 dogs, Boomer and Ruger, into my beat-up F-150 and hit the road south without looking back. The ranch was everything Grandpa had described in his stories. He'd called it the heart of freedom, a place where a man could breathe, think, and live on his own terms. No HOA, no city council, no bureaucrats telling you how to paint your mailbox. Just 102 acres of raw, beautiful land, framed by distant mountains and a sky so wide it made you feel small. The cabin was modest, wooden walls weathered by decades of sun, a tin roof that creaked in the wind, and a front porch with a single rocking chair. Inside, it smelled of old leather and pine, like Grandpa's aftershave still lingered. There was a small kitchen, a fireplace, and a bedroom barely big enough for a cot. It wasn't much, but it was mine. For the first time in years, I felt like I could plant roots. Boomer, a German shepherd with a nose for trouble, and Ruger, a lanky black lab who'd follow me into hell, took to the place like they'd been born here. They'd chase jackrabbits through the brush, their barks echoing across the valley, and at night they'd sprawl out on the porch, guarding the cabin like sentinels. I spent those first weeks settling in, fixing what needed fixing. The solar panels out back were outdated but functional after some tinkering. I patched leaks in the roof, cleared weeds from the front yard, and even started a small garden, tomatoes, peppers, and a few herbs, though I wasn't sure the desert soil would cooperate. Mornings were quiet, just me, the dogs, and the sound of my boots on the dirt as I hiked the property, mapping it out in my head. I'd walk the fence line, checking for weak spots, and every now and then I'd stop at the old barn, a crumbling relic where Grandpa used to teach me to shoot when I was a kid. Those were good days, back when life was simpler, before war and loss carved their marks on me. I should have known the peace wouldn't last. Trouble came creeping in, not with a bang, but with a whisper, like a snake slithering through the grass. It started with the mailbox. One morning, I found a typed note stuffed inside, no signature, just bold black ink on crisp white paper. Please maintain your property to community standards. Weeds and debris are unacceptable. I laughed it off at first. Community standards? My ranch wasn't part of any community, least of all Creekstone Trails, the shiny new HOA-controlled development next door. Their houses were all beige stucco and manicured lawns, each one a carbon copy of the next, with signs boasting luxury living and family-friendly amenities. My land, with its uneven dirt paths and wild mesquite, must have looked like a thorn in their side. Still, I figured the note was a mistake, someone's overzealous attempt at neighborhood watch. I crumpled it up and tossed it in the trash. But the notes kept coming. Every few days, another one, each more demanding than the last. Your fence is an eyesore. Repaint or replace it. Unregistered vehicles are prohibited. Your dogs must be leashed at all times. That last one got under my skin. Boomer and Ruger roamed free on my land, miles from anyone else's property, and they were better behaved than most people. I started checking the mailbox with a knot in my stomach, knowing I'd find another passive-aggressive jab. Then the visits started. I'd be out working on the garden or cleaning my rifle on the porch when a car would pull up, always a shiny SUV, always with a Creekstone Trails sticker on the bumper. Someone would step out, clipboard in hand, and start poking around my fence line, taking notes, snapping photos. They'd never knock, never introduce themselves, just act like they owned the place. One afternoon, a woman in a bright pink polo shirt marched right up to my porch, her heels sinking into the dirt. She had a pinched face, like she'd just smelled something sour, and a name tag that read Karen, HOA president. I'd later learn everyone called her HOA Karen, and for good reason. "Mr. Granger, is it?" she said, not waiting for an answer. "Your cabin doesn't comply with our neighborhood aesthetic guidelines. The color palette is all wrong, and frankly, it's lowering our property values." I set down the wrench I was holding and stood, wiping my hands on my jeans. "Ma'am, this isn't your neighborhood. My land's outside your jurisdiction. You've got no say here." Her eyes narrowed, but she didn't back down. "We're a community, Mr. Granger. Your property borders ours, and that makes it our concern. I suggest you cooperate." She handed me a glossy pamphlet titled Creekstone Trails Community Standards and walked off, leaving a cloud of perfume and entitlement in her wake. That was the moment I knew this wasn't just a misunderstanding. These people weren't going to leave me alone. They saw my ranch as a problem, a blemish on their perfect little world, and they were determined to fix it. I tried to stay calm, to keep things civil. I dealt with worse than nosy neighbors, IEDs, ambushes, nights where sleep was a luxury, but something about their arrogance lit a fuse in me. I wasn't looking for a fight, but I wasn't going to roll over either. Grandpa had taught me to stand my ground, to protect what's yours, and this land was mine. Things got worse fast. One morning, I found a group of HOA board members, 6 of them, all in matching polo shirts, parked on my ranch road, blocking the only way in or out. They were inspecting my gate, claiming it violated some county ordinance. I drove up, leaned out my truck window, and told them to move. They didn't. One guy, a wiry dude with a goatee, smirked and said, "This road's public access. You don't own it." I pointed to the deed in my glove box, which clearly showed the road was private property, and said, "You've got 5 minutes before I call the sheriff." They scattered like roaches when the light comes on, but not before goatee guy muttered something about teaching me a lesson. That's when I decided to push back. I'd been cleaning out the barn, sorting through Grandpa's old tools and junk, when I found a stack of metal targets he'd used for shooting practice. They were rusted but solid, perfect for a makeshift gun range. I'd always planned to set one up eventually. Shooting was how I cleared my head, how I stayed sharp, but the HOA's nonsense gave me a reason to do it now. I spent a weekend dragging those targets out to the edge of my property, right along the borderline with Creekstone Trails. I hammered stakes into the ground, hung the targets, and set up a firing line with old wooden benches. It wasn't fancy, but it was functional. I posted a sign, hand-painted on a slab of plywood: "Private property, live fire zone. Trespassers will be escorted by sheriff." The first shot rang out on a Saturday morning. I lined up my old AR-15, sighted a metal target 50 yards out, and squeezed the trigger. The bullet hit dead center, and the clang echoed through the valley, sharp and unmistakable. Boomer and Ruger perked up, tails wagging, like they approved. I took another shot, then another, each one a release, a declaration. This was my land, my rules. The HOA could send all the notes they wanted. I wasn't going anywhere. I didn't have to wait long for a reaction. By noon, Karen was at the fence line, her face redder than the Arizona sun. She had her clipboard clutched to her chest like a shield, and her posse of board members trailed behind her, looking like they'd rather be anywhere else. "You can't do this," she shrieked, stomping her heel into the dirt. "You're disturbing the peace." This is a residential area. I pulled off my ear protection and walked up to the property line, calm as could be. Karen, this is my land. I can shoot here all day if I want. It's legal, and you know it. I pointed to the sign. Her eyes bugged out, and she started sputtering about noise ordinances and safety hazards. One of her board members, a guy with a bad comb-over, dropped his iced coffee in the dirt. Another started filming me with his phone, like I was some kind of criminal. That's when the sheriff's cruiser rolled up. Dust kicked up under the tires as Deputy Mark, a guy I'd met at the gas station a few weeks back, stepped out. He was built like a linebacker, with a no-nonsense stare that could make a coyote think twice. He glanced at my setup, then at the sign, and gave me a nod, like we'd fought in the same trenches. Looks like everything's in order, Josh, he said, lifting his sunglasses. Karen's jaw hit the ground. But he's running a gun range right next to our development, she wailed. Deputy Mark turned to her, his voice flat. Ma'am, you told this man he didn't have road access. You shut off his water lines. You even tried blocking his gate with your HOA vehicles. He's not breaking any laws. You are. Karen's face went pale, and I couldn't help but grin. She didn't know the half of it. See, I'd found something else in the barn that morning. Something that changed everything. While clearing out a pile of old crates, I'd stumbled across a rusted metal box buried under a tarp. It was heavy, locked tight, and looked like it hadn't been touched in decades. I didn't have the tools to open it yet, but I had a feeling it was important. Something Grandpa had hidden with purpose. And then there was the land itself. I'd been going through Grandpa's papers, the ones the lawyer had given me, and I'd found a map from 1962, marked with easement lines and a clause that made my pulse race. The HOA thought they owned the strip of land between my ranch and their development. They were wrong. Part of their precious clubhouse, the one they held all their meetings in, was built on my property. Karen didn't know it yet, but she'd picked a fight with the wrong guy. That night, as I sat on the porch cleaning my rifle, the wind picked up, rattling the tin roof. Boomer and Ruger were sprawled out, snoring, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. I walked the fence line with a flashlight, checking the targets, and that's when I saw it, a freshly dug hole near one of the posts, like someone had been snooping. There, sticking out of the dirt, was a glint of metal. Not mine. I crouched down, heart pounding, and brushed away the soil. It was another box, smaller than the one in the barn, but just as old. I didn't touch it. Not yet. I needed to know what I was dealing with, and I needed to be ready for whatever the HOA threw at me next. The next morning, I called a buddy from my Marine days, Trevor, who ran a logistics business in Phoenix. He wasn't just a friend. He was the kind of guy who'd drop everything to help you bury a body, no questions asked. I need some gear, I told him. Cameras, floodlights, the works. And maybe a couple of water tanks, just in case. He didn't ask why. He just said, give me 48 hours. I hung up and looked out at the range, the targets gleaming in the sunlight. This wasn't just about shooting anymore. It was about sending a message. The HOA wanted a war? Fine. I'd give them one they'd never forget. Over the next few days, I doubled down. I expanded the range, adding more targets and a safety barrier made from old tires and plywood. I invited a few local veterans to come out, guys I'd met at the VFW, guys who, like me, were trying to find their place after the service. They brought their own rifles, their own stories, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like I wasn't alone. We ran drills, swapped tips, laughed over bad coffee. It was more than a range, it was a brotherhood. Word spread fast, and soon I had a dozen guys showing up every weekend, some with their kids, some with their dads. A retired cop even rolled up with a food truck one day, handing out burgers to anyone with a DD-214. On the house, he said. Vets take care of vets. Karen lost it. I'd see her SUV parked just beyond the fence, her watching us through binoculars, scribbling furiously on her clipboard. She'd send more letters, each one crazier than the last. One claimed my range was a public safety hazard. Another said I was operating an illegal business. The best one demanded I leash Boomer and Ruger at all times, even though we were miles from her precious development. I didn't respond. Instead, I got louder. I held a range safety course open to anyone who wanted to learn. Men, women, even a few teenagers with their parents showed up. We went over gun handling, first aid, self-defense. It was loud, legal, and it echoed across creekstone trails all day long. But the real game changer came when I finally cracked open that first metal box from the barn. I'd brought it inside, set it on the kitchen table, and cut through the rusted hinges with a rotary tool. Inside was a leather folder, a yellowed map, and an envelope with my name on it, written in Grandpa's shaky handwriting. I opened the letter first, my hands trembling. If you're reading this, it means the HOA has pushed you to your limit. Don't let them win. This ranch stands on a legal clause they don't know exists, but they will. The map shows the easement lines from 1962. My signature is on file at the county. So, is the override clause the land they think they own? They never bought it. You hold the key now. I read it twice, then spread the map out on the table. It was old, hand-drawn, but clear as day. The easement lines showed my property extending several feet into creekstone trails, right under their clubhouse. The folder was a gold mine. Original deeds, surveyor documents, county stamps, all proving Grandpa's claim. I sat back, heart racing, as Boomer nudged my leg. Karen wasn't just fighting a losing battle. She was trespassing on my land, and she had no idea what I'd found. I wasn't ready to play that card yet, but when I did, it was going to hit like a sledgehammer. For now, I kept it quiet. I scanned the documents, sent copies to 2 attorneys I trusted, and filed the originals with the county land office. I wasn't just preparing for a fight, I was building a fortress. The HOA could keep coming, keep pushing, but I was ready. And deep down, I knew this was about more than just my ranch. It was about Grandpa's legacy, about every vet who'd ever been told to sit down and shut up. It was about freedom, plain and simple. And I'd be damned if I let Karen and her clipboard take that away from me. The Arizona sun was relentless, baking the earth until it cracked, but I barely noticed as I crouched by the edge of my makeshift gun range, brushing dirt off the rusted metal box I'd found buried near the fence line. My hands were steady, but my pulse was not. This wasn't just some forgotten relic. It felt like a warning, a piece of a puzzle I hadn't yet solved. Boomer and Ruger paced nearby, their ears pricked, sensing the tension in the air. Across the property line, Karen stood with her HOA posse, her face drained of color, her clipboard dangling like a surrendered flag. She'd been screaming about my range just minutes ago, but now she was silent, her eyes locked on the box. "You okay there, Karen?" I called out, my voice calm but edged with steel. She didn't answer. She spun on her heel and marched off, her board members trailing behind like scolded kids, whispering and glancing back over their shoulders. Deputy Mark, who'd shown up to check on the commotion, stepped up beside me, his boots crunching on the gravel. "You think she knows what's in there?" he asked, nodding at the box. I shook my head. She looked like she saw a ghost. I decided to leave the box where it was for now. It was old, heavy, and locked tight, something Grandpa would have buried with intent. I didn't have the tools to open it safely, and I wasn't about to risk damaging whatever was inside. Instead, I marked the spot with a stake and covered it with a tarp, promising myself I'd deal with it once I had a proper lock and a plan. For now, I had bigger problems. The Creekstone Trails HO wasn't just annoyed anymore. They were desperate, and desperate people do stupid things. I'd seen it in the Corps, guys who'd crack under pressure, make reckless calls, and get themselves or others hurt. Karen and her board were headed down that road, and I needed to be ready for whatever they threw at me next. The past few weeks had been a slow burn of escalation. After I set up the gun range, the HOA's harassment went from petty to personal. It wasn't just notes in my mailbox anymore. They'd started messing with my lifeline, my access, my water, my freedom. First, they blocked my ranch road with their SUVs, claiming it was public access despite my deed proving otherwise. I'd chase them off with a call to Deputy Mark, but not before they left tire tracks and a dented gate. Then they cut my water lines. Not physically, I checked, but they'd leaned on the county utility office with some bullshit complaint about unpermitted connections, forcing a temporary shutoff. I had to haul water in jugs from town for a week until I got it sorted. Every trip a reminder of how low these people would stoop. They even tried parking an HOA maintenance truck in front of my gate one morning, blocking my delivery of solar panel parts. I towed it myself with a chain and my F-150, left it in a ditch, and sent Karen a photo with a note. Next time, it's the impound lot. But they didn't stop. The HOA's next move was to hammer 3 no trespassing HOA jurisdiction signs into my fence posts, right on my land. I came back from a supply run to find them gleaming in the sun, bold as brass. Boomer and Ruger had already done me a favor. One sign was shredded, claw marks and teeth prints all over it. Good boys. I ripped the other 2 down and burned them in a fire pit that night, the flames licking up the Creekstone Trails logo like it was kindling. Then came the letters, typed in bold black ink, sealed in fancy envelopes with their official stamp. Each one was a new threat. I was operating a public business in violation of community standards. My range was a noise nuisance. My dogs were a safety hazard. One even claimed I needed to submit my cabin's paint color for HOA approval. I was miles outside their territory, but that didn't matter. They were trying to bury me in paperwork, scare me into submission. I didn't respond. I wasn't playing their game. Instead, I did what Grandpa would have done. I got louder. The gun range became my middle finger to their tyranny. I expanded it, hauling in more targets, building safety barriers from scrap wood and old tires, and painting distance markers on the ground. I invited more veterans out, guys who'd heard about the range through the VFW or word of mouth. They showed up with their rifles, their stories, and their scars, and we built something real. We ran drills, taught marksmanship, swapped tips on everything from reloading to PTSD coping strategies. A retired Marine named Miguel, a sniper with eyes like a hawk, became a regular. He'd bring his teenage son, who was learning to shoot, and the kid's smile when he hit a target was worth more than any HOA approval. Another guy, a former cop named Dave, rolled up with a food truck one Saturday and fed everyone for free. "Let's stick together," he said, flipping burgers. It felt like family, like the brotherhood I'd missed since leaving the Corps. Karen hated it. She'd park her SUV just beyond the fence, watching us through binoculars, her lips pursed like she'd swallowed a lemon. Her board members would show up too, taking photos, filming, whispering to each other like spies in a bad movie. They'd send more letters, each one more unhinged. One claimed my range was attracting dangerous elements to the area. Another said I was endangering children in their development, even though the nearest kid was half a mile away behind a 6-foot fence. I started framing the letters on my cabin wall, a gallery of their insanity. But I knew they weren't just blowing smoke. They were building a case, trying to find a legal hook to shut me down. I needed to stay one step ahead. That's when I turned to the box in the barn, the one I'd found while setting up the range. I'd brought it inside, cut through the rusted hinges with a rotary tool, and popped it open one night with Boomer at my feet and Ruger pacing the room. Inside was a leather folder, a yellowed map, and an envelope addressed to me in Grandpa's handwriting. The letter was short but heavy. If you're reading this, it means the HOA has pushed you to your limit. Don't let them win. This ranch stands on a legal clause they don't know exists, but they will. The map shows the easement lines from 1962. My signature is on file at the county. So, is the override clause the land they think they own? They never bought it. You hold the key now. I spread the map out on the table, my hands shaking. It showed my property line extending into Creekstone Trails, right under their clubhouse. The folder was a treasure trove, deeds, surveyor records, county stamps, all proving Grandpa's claim. The HOA wasn't just harassing me, they were trespassing on my land, and they'd been doing it for years. I didn't tell anyone yet. Knowledge was power, and I wasn't ready to show my cards. Instead, I scanned every document, sent copies to 2 attorneys I trusted, and filed the originals with the county land office. I also called Trevor, my Marine buddy in Phoenix, and asked him to hook me up with security gear. Cameras, motion sensors, floodlights, I said. And make it quick. He delivered in 48 hours, solar-powered cameras, silent alarms, even a drone jammer Miguel recommended. We wired the place like a forward operating base, every inch of the fence line under watch. If Karen so much as sneezed on my property, I'd have it on tape. But the HOA wasn't done. Their next move was sabotage, and it hit hard. I came back from a short trip to town one evening, my truck loaded with groceries and ammo, and found my water tank smashed to pieces. It was a 5,000-gallon beast, my main clean water source, and someone had rammed it with a vehicle, probably a truck, judging by the tire marks leading up to it. Water was pooling in the dirt, thousands of gallons soaking into the ground. Gone. Boomer barked furiously, sniffing the wreckage, while Ruger growled at the dark road beyond the fence. My jaw clenched so tight I thought my teeth might crack. This wasn't an accident. It was war. I called Deputy Mark right away. They smashed my water tank, I said, my voice low but shaking with rage. There was a pause on the line. Was it a hit or a puncture? He asked. Hit, I said, walking back to the wreckage. You can still see the tire marks. I'll be there in 10, he replied. Sure enough, his cruiser pulled up minutes later, red and blue lights flashing across the dark yard. He crouched beside the tank, flashlight in hand, and shook his head. Looks deliberate, he muttered. You gonna be okay for water? I nodded. I'll haul some in from town if I have to, but I'm not letting this go. He smirked. Didn't think you would. While Mark took photos and wrote up a report, I made some calls. Trevor was first on the list. I need water tanks, plural, and a delivery schedule, I told him. Route them through the north trailhead. The HOA can't touch that. He didn't ask questions, just said on it. By midnight, we had 2 temporary tanks on the way, enough to keep me going. I also called a tech guy from the VFW, an ex-Army engineer named Carlos, who helped me set up more cameras around the tank site. If they come back, we'll catch M, he said, wiring a motion sensor to a floodlight. I nodded, but deep down, I knew this was just the beginning. The HOA wasn't playing anymore. They were trying to starve me out. The next morning, I drove to the county land office with the leather folder from the box. It was heavy in my hands, like it carried Grandpa's ghost. The clerk, a young woman named Janelle, raised an eyebrow as she flipped through the documents. Wow, she said. This goes way back. I leaned forward. I need confirmation. Is this landmine, including the border they're building over? She nodded slowly. If these are legit, they're not only trespassing, they've been doing it for years. You'll want the assessor and legal office to review. We can fast-track it if you want. Do it, I said, but keep it quiet. I didn't want the HOA catching wind before I was ready. I left the office with a fire in my chest, the kind I hadn't felt since my last deployment. This wasn't just about my ranch anymore. It was about justice, about honoring Grandpa's legacy. But things got worse before they got better. That weekend, while I was running drills with a few vets on the range, we heard a buzzing overhead. I looked up and saw it, a drone, hovering low, its camera glinting in the sun. Miguel grabbed his scope and tracked it. That's a recon model, he said. Somebody's watching. I didn't need to guess who. Karen. But she didn't know Miguel had a drone jammer, legal in Arizona for private use. We powered it up, and 10 minutes later, the drone was down, grounded gently in a patch of sagebrush. We didn't destroy it, just packaged it up with a note. Private land. Filming veterans is a federal privacy violation. Next time, it goes to the FBI. I had Carlos overnight it to the HOA office, signature required. After that, I went all in on security. More cameras, more lights, all solar-powered and silent. I wanted every inch of my land locked down. But I didn't stop there. The range was growing, and so was our community. We planted trees along the perimeter to cut down on noise, handed out ear protection to every visitor, and enforced strict rules. No alcohol, no horseplay. Respect the land. The sheriff's office sent a deputy to tour the setup and gave us a thumbs up, calling it one of the safest non-commercial ranges in the county. But the HOA didn't care about safety. They cared about control, and I was slipping through their fingers. Their next attack came in the form of a letter, this time from a law firm, Miller & Price, LLP. It was official, printed on heavy stock and dripping with legalese. They claimed my range was a public nuisance, violating environmental codes and disrupting the peace of the surrounding community. They demanded I shut it down within 48 hours or face a lawsuit. I read it twice, then left. They didn't know I'd already beaten them to the punch. The county assessor had confirmed my land rights, including the strip under their clubhouse. My range was compliant. Their property was not. I faxed the assessor's confirmation and my survey documents to the law firm, along with a letter of my own. Cease all harassment and remove your fixtures from my property within 10 days, or I'll file for damages, trespassing, and property devaluation in Superior Court. You have until Friday. I didn't hear back right away, but I knew they were rattled. That night, I sat on the porch, sipping coffee and watching the stars. Boomer and Ruger were at my feet, finally calm after a long day. Then I heard it, tires skidding on gravel. I grabbed my flashlight and stepped outside, the dogs on high alert. My water tank was already a wreck, but this was something else. I followed the sound to the southern edge of the range, and there it was. My wood pile, stacked for winter, was on fire. It was a small blaze, but dangerous in the dry brush. I called 911, grabbed a hose, and started dousing it while the dogs barked like mad. The fire department got there fast, keeping it from spreading, and when the last embers were out, a firefighter handed me something they'd found, a red gas canister, labeled in black Sharpie, property of HOA maintenance shed number 3. I stared at it, my heart thudding. This wasn't harassment anymore. It was arson. The HOA had crossed a line, and they'd left their fingerprints all over it. I handed the canister to Deputy Mark when he showed up, his face grim as he snapped photos. Jesus, he said. They were trying to start something big. I folded my arms. They're trying to force me out, and they're getting sloppy. He looked me in the eye. You ready to go public with this? I didn't hesitate. Hell yeah. Let's burn them down legally. The next morning, I called Trevor and asked him to connect me with someone in the local news. Someone tough, I said. Someone who won't back down from a fight. By noon, I was standing in front of my cabin with Lisa Green, a reporter with a reputation for taking on bullies, and her cameraman, Jordan. They filmed everything: the burned wood pile, the smashed water tank, the bullet-ridden targets. I showed them the gas canister, the survey maps, the 1962 easement, and Grandpa's deeds. Lisa's eyes lit up as she flipped through the folder. This is gonna blow up, she said, turning to the camera with a grin. I didn't want fame. I didn't want to go viral. I wanted peace. But if peace wasn't an option, I'd settle for justice. And justice was coming for Creekstone Trails, whether they liked it or not. The Arizona sky was a bruised purple as I stood in the fading light, holding the red gas canister marked property of HOA maintenance shed number 3. My boots sank into the scorched earth where the fire had burned my wood pile, the acrid smell of smoke still clinging to the air. Boomer and Ruger paced nearby, their growls low and steady, sensing the weight of what had just happened. This wasn't just harassment anymore. It was arson, a deliberate attempt to burn me out. The Creekstone Trails HOA had crossed a line, and they'd left a smoking gun in their wake. The firefighter who'd handed me the canister, a grizzled guy named Tom, looked at me with a mix of pity and respect. You need to report this to the sheriff, he said, his voice firm. This is serious. I nodded, my jaw tight. Oh, I will. And I'm not letting it slide. Deputy Mark arrived 30 minutes later, his cruiser's lights casting eerie flashes across the dark yard. I handed him the canister and pointed to the blackened ground. Jesus, he muttered, kneeling to snap photos. This wasn't a warning. They were trying to start something big. I crossed my arms, the anger in my chest burning hotter than the fire had. They're desperate, Mark. They know they're losing and they're getting sloppy. He stood, his eyes meeting mine. You ready to go public with what you got? I didn't even hesitate. Let's go full steam. This wasn't just about protecting my ranch anymore. It was about exposing the HOA for what they were, bullies who thought they could intimidate a veteran off his land. They'd picked the wrong fight. The next morning, I called Trevor, my Marine buddy in Phoenix, and told him I needed a favor. Get me someone in the local news, I said. Someone who won't flinch when the HOA starts waving their lawyers around. Trevor didn't mess around. By noon, I was shaking hands with Lisa Green, a reporter with a reputation for tearing into corruption like a pit bull, and her cameraman, Jordan, a quiet guy with a knack for getting the perfect shot. They set up in front of my cabin, the gun range stretching out behind us, bullet-ridden targets glinting in the sun. I walked them through everything: the smashed water tank, the burned wood pile, the no trespassing signs the HOA had hammered into my fence. I showed them the gas canister, its bold black lettering undeniable proof of their guilt. Then I pulled out the big guns, Grandpa's leather folder, the 1962 easement map, the county stamp deeds proving that part of their precious clubhouse was built on my land. Lisa's eyes widened as she flipped through the documents, her pen scratching furiously on her notepad. This is explosive, she said, turning to Jordan with a fierce smile. We're running this tonight. They filmed me walking the property line, pointing out the exact spot where the HOA's clubhouse encroached. I showed them the cameras I'd installed, the floodlights, the drone jammer Miguel had brought in. I even let them film Boomer and Ruger, who sat proudly by my side, their service vests gleaming. This isn't just about me, I told the camera, my voice steady. It's about every veteran who's ever been told to shut up and sit down. This land is ours, and we're not going anywhere. By 6 p.m., the segment was live on 3 local channels, the headline screaming, "Veteran claims HOA tried to burn him off his land, and he is proof." Lisa's voiceover laid it all bare, detailing the HOA's harassment, the sabotage, the arson attempt. They showed drone footage of the range, interviews with Deputy Mark, who confirmed the canister came from the HOA's shed, and a few of the local vets who trained with me, each one backing my story. The county assessor even made a surprise appearance, verifying that my property line extended into creekstone trails. The internet exploded. Comments flooded in, thousands of them, from people I'd never met. This is insane. How is this legal? That man served our country, and this is how they treat him? HOA bullies getting what they deserve. I'd join his gun range in a heartbeat. My phone buzzed nonstop, texts, emails, voicemails from strangers offering support, donations, even legal help. I didn't want fame, but I'd take the army of allies. The HOA board was in a tailspin. Karen, their fearless leader, went radio silent, her SUV nowhere to be seen. But her lawyer, Nathan Fox, showed up the next day, looking like he'd slept in his suit. His tie was crooked, his face tight with stress. "I'm here to speak off the record," he said, standing at my gate, a glossy envelope in hand. "We'd like to resolve this quietly." I raised an eyebrow. "You mean before I press charges for arson?" His jaw twitched, but he pressed on. "The board is prepared to offer $150,000 immediate transfer. No court filings." I stepped onto the porch, leaning on the railing, and looked out at the desert, the trees swaying in the breeze. "My grandfather built this place with his own hands," I said. "He taught me to fish in the creek, showed me how to shoot at the old barn. You think I'd sell it now after everything?" Fox hesitated, then tried a new tack. There may be more aggressive measures if this isn't resolved privately. I gave him a cold smile. Careful how you finish that sentence, Nate. He backed off, his tires kicking up dust as he peeled out. That night, things took a darker turn. Around 11 p.m., I saw headlights on the north side of the property, multiple sets, moving slow. I killed the cabin lights, grabbed my binoculars, and peered out from behind the curtains. For black SUVs, no plates, parked just beyond the borderline. Doors opened, and several figures stepped out, big, stocky guys in dark hoodies. One carried something that glinted in the moonlight, a crowbar. This wasn't a visit, it was an invasion. I called Deputy Mark, keeping my voice low. They're on the property line. For vehicles, multiple men. I'm rolling out now, he said. Do not engage unless they cross your side. I'll call backup. But I wasn't waiting. I stepped outside with Boomer and Ruger, both dogs on high alert, and flipped on the new floodlights I'd installed. Bright white light flooded the area, blinding anyone within 100 feet. The intruders froze. I spoke, my voice cutting through the silence like a blade. This is private property under federal protection. You're trespassing on veteran land. You have 60 seconds to leave before the sheriff arrives. One of the men cursed. Another shouted, "Screw this, let's go." They scrambled back to their SUVs and sped off just as Mark's cruiser screeched up, red and blue lights blazing. He got out, looked at me, and asked, "You good?" I nodded. For now. We reviewed the camera footage, clear shots of all 4 vehicles, and better yet, one of the guys had yanked off his mask, revealing his face. Mark recognized him instantly. "That's Greg Holloway," he said. "He's on the HOA board." I grinned. Gotcha. I sent the footage to Lisa at the news station, and by noon, it was everywhere. HOA board member caught in nighttime trespass, attempt on Veterans Ranch. The story went national, picked up by veteran advocacy channels, and even a few talk shows. My inbox was a flood of support, but the HOA wasn't done. They were just getting started. 3 days later, my phone buzzed with a message from the county legal office. Urgent. Review the newly filed court documents from Creekstone Trails HOA. I opened the attachment and felt my blood boil. They were suing me, claiming emotional distress from unregulated firearm activity and demanding a forced shutdown of the gun range. They tried starving me out, burning me out, and now they were trying to bankrupt me. It was a desperate move, a last-ditch effort to flip the script and paint me as the villain, a dangerous vet with a gun range terrorizing their perfect suburb. But they didn't know I wasn't fighting alone anymore. The night before, after the trespassing stunt, my story had hit a national veteran advocacy channel. Suddenly, I was getting calls from across the country, retired Navy SEALs, Army medics, Marine engineers, even a Vietnam vet named Hank who said, "I got land and tools if you need them." Veterans don't leave each other behind, and the HOA was about to learn what that meant. I lawyered up with Malcolm Hayes, a retired federal prosecutor who looked like he could bench press a Buick and had zero patience for nonsense. He reviewed the HOA's lawsuit in 10 minutes flat. "This is weak," he said, tossing the papers on his desk. "No hard evidence, just noise complaints and exaggerated claims. Half their documents are missing dates and signatures." I leaned back in my chair. "They've got money, though. And connections." Malcolm smirked. "Yeah, well, I've got experience, and you've got the law." We filed a counterclaim within 48 hours. Malicious prosecution, trespassing, harassment, arson suspicion, and defamation. We submitted everything. The gas canister, the trespassing footage, the smashed water tank photos, the county assessor's confirmation, Grandpa's deeds, and every threatening letter the HOA had sent. It wasn't just defense, it was a full-on assault. The moment our counterclaim went public, the tide turned. Karen wasn't the concerned HOA president anymore. She was the face of a bully board, the kind that pokes a bear and cries when it bites. I wasn't just the gun range guy, I was the veteran standing his ground. Even the sheriff's department issued a statement defending my right to operate the range, calling it fully compliant with county regulations. But the HOA doubled down. 2 days after our filing, I spotted surveyors on their side of the fence, measuring the borderline with fancy equipment. Karen had hired a private firm, probably hoping to prove I was the one encroaching. Too late. The assessor had already confirmed my rights, but I let them waste their money. I even brought the survey crew lemonade, playing the good neighbor. "Y'all staying hydrated?" I asked, handing out plastic cups. One of the guys, a young tech with a sunburned neck, laughed. "Honestly, I don't know what this lady wants. We've measured this line twice. She keeps saying she feels you're lying." I tipped my hat. Tell her feelings don't move fences. The HOA's grip was slipping, and even their own residents were turning. I started getting anonymous emails from Creekstone Trails homeowners, some apologizing, others spilling dirt on Karen's tactics. One woman left a handwritten note in my mailbox. "I'm sorry for what they're doing. Not all of us agree. Most of us just want peace." It hit hard because peace was all I'd ever wanted. But peace was never part of Karen's plan. She was spiraling, and she proved it with a single, catastrophic mistake. Miguel, the sniper vet who'd become my right-hand man, texted me one afternoon with a link. "Check this out," he wrote. It was a screenshot from Karen's personal social media, a post she'd thought was private. In it, she ranted about how people like him didn't deserve to own land, how veterans with combat trauma were a threat to society, and how she'd make sure the gun nut got shut down for good. It was a gut punch, not because it hurt, but because it was so damn stupid. She'd handed us a loaded weapon. Miguel forwarded the screenshots to Malcolm, who had them submitted as evidence within hours. The judge marked them as prejudicial, and just like that, Karen was cooked. But the real knockout was still coming. Grandpa's map had mentioned something I hadn't fully explored, a trail called Liberty Line, marked with a star, leading to a clearing on the back of the property. The day after the surveyors left, I hiked it with Boomer and Ruger, cutting through thick brush for 20 minutes until we reached it. What I found stopped me cold, a set of rotting wooden posts surrounding a faded sign that read Granger Community Center, 1965. Grandpa had tried to build a veteran hub decades ago, before the HOA existed. He'd laid the foundation, registered the intent with the county, but never finished. I stood there, the dogs at my side, and felt his presence like a hand on my shoulder. This was why I was here. This was what I'd fight for. I called Trevor, Miguel, and every vet who'd ever shot at my range. "We're finishing what Grandpa started," I told them. We drew up plans, filed permits, and broke ground within a month. The sign we put up said it all. Granger Veteran Training Resource Center, founded 1965, reborn 2025. Karen tried one last noise complaint when we poured concrete, but the county shut her down. The land was mine, the range was legal, and the future was ours. The HOA's lawsuit was crumbling, their board was fracturing, and their residents were defecting. But I wasn't done. I had one more move, and it was going to hit like a bunker buster. The fight wasn't just about winning. It was about building something that would outlast us all. And Creekstone Trails was about to learn that the hard way. The courthouse steps were warm under my boots as I stepped into the Arizona sunlight, the weight of the judge's ruling still sinking in. The air felt different, cleaner, like the desert had exhaled after holding its breath too long. My attorney, Malcolm Hayes, clapped me on the shoulder, his gravelly voice cutting through the hum of reporters and onlookers. "You did it, Josh. They're done." I nodded, but I didn't smile. Not yet. The Creekstone Trails HOA had lost, their injunction denied, their claims shredded, my land and the Granger Veteran Training Resource Center protected for good. Karen and her board were ordered to pay restitution for damages and issue a public apology, with a felony trespass charge hanging over their heads if they ever crossed my property line again. It was a victory, no question, but it wasn't the end. It was a beginning, and I could feel it in my bones. Inside the courtroom, it had been a slaughter. The judge, a retired Army colonel with a stare that could melt steel, had zero patience for the HOA's theatrics. "This isn't about noise complaints," she'd said, her gavel cracking like a rifle shot. "This is about whether the HOA has abused its power and crossed into criminal behavior." Karen sat in the front row, sunglasses on indoors like she was auditioning for a reality show, her lips pressed into a thin line. Her lawyer stammered through a weak defense about preserving community tranquility, but Malcolm shut it down with a binder thick enough to stop a bullet. "We have 27 documented incidents of trespassing, sabotage, threats, and intimidation," he said, dropping the evidence on the desk with a thud. "This isn't about tranquility. It's about targeting a veteran for personal gain." The testimony sealed it. Deputy Mark laid out the HOA's crimes, blocking my roads, tampering with my water, filing false complaints. Miguel, the sniper vet, talked about how the range helped him heal after combat, his voice steady but raw. Lisa Green, the reporter, testified about the HOA's attempts to pressure her station into killing my story. Even the county assessor took the stand, confirming that my property line cut right through their clubhouse. When the judge turned to Karen and asked if she denied her board's actions, she froze. Malcolm slid her social media post across the table, the one calling veterans a threat to society, and the room went still. "I had no knowledge," she started, but the judge cut her off. "We have your words in evidence, Ms. Thompson." Karen's shoulders slumped, and just like that, it was over. Outside, the crowd was electric. Veterans in uniform, neighbors, even a group of high school kids who'd taken safety classes at the range cheered as I walked out. Miguel grinned, clapping me on the back. "Next round of training's on me." I finally let myself smile. Good, because we're just getting started. But even as the adrenaline faded, I knew the HOA wasn't done. Desperation makes people reckless, and Karen's crew was cornered. That night, around 2 a.m., Ruger's barking woke me. Boomer joined in, a low growl that meant trouble. I grabbed my flashlight and stepped outside, heart pounding. At the fence line, 4 figures in black hoodies were planting something, another gas can, a long wire glinting in the moonlight. They were trying to burn me out again. But they didn't know about the silent alarms I'd installed, or the night vision cameras wired by ex-Army techs who turned my ranch into a fortress. I didn't need to call 911. Deputy Mark and 3 cruisers were already en route. Within 6 minutes, the property lit up with red and blue lights. 3 of the intruders bolted. They didn't get far. Boomer chased one into a deputy's arms, Ruger cornered another by the generator shed, and the 4th tripped over a newly planted tree, too busy ditching his gas can to run. It was a clean sweep. When their masks came off, I wasn't surprised. 2 HOA board members, the teenage son of Karen's vice president, and a maintenance worker with a gate code he shouldn't have had. Mark was livid. "They crossed a big line," he said, cuffing the last guy. "This is attempted arson, trespassing, conspiracy." Karen didn't show at her next board meeting. Word was she was taking time off for stress, but we all knew she was dodging the fallout. The final blow came 3 days later with a court summons. The HOA was pushing for a permanent injunction to shut down the Range and Resource Center, claiming it created an unsafe environment and violated local values. It was a Hail Mary, meant to drag things out, make it expensive, wear me down. But they'd miscalculated. I had the veterans, the county, the law, and a mountain of evidence. The hearing room was packed, reporters, deputies, vets in dress blues, even Creekstone Trails residents who turned on their own board. The judge wasted no time. She denied the injunction, called their claims baseless, and ordered the HOA to tear down their clubhouse for encroaching on my land. Karen sat silent, her sunglasses gone, her face pale. The board's apology was mandated to be read at their annual meeting, live-streamed to 200 furious homeowners. 2 months later, the Granger Veteran Training Resource Center was no longer a dream, it was a movement. The ribbon-cutting ceremony was small but powerful, with local news crews, deputies standing proud, and a few Creekstone Trails residents watching quietly from the sidelines. I wore my old dress blues, not for show, but for Grandpa. When I cut the ribbon with his old bayonet, I could hear his voice. Make noise, but make it count. The center was a sanctuary, dirt courtyard, shaded pavilion, a shed-turned classroom, and a foundation for future growth. The range had safer lanes, marked stations, and distance markers painted by local teens. Every inch was legal, licensed, and backed by veteran groups across Arizona. Donations poured in cash, supplies, even a set of free weights from a retired Navy engineer who drove up from San Diego. We added solar-powered lights, a second classroom, and an outdoor gym under a steel awning. Families from nearby towns started visiting, kids learning safety and gardening, adults taking CPR courses. The center wasn't just for vets anymore, it was a lifeline for anyone who valued freedom and grit. Creekstone Trails, meanwhile, was imploding. Karen was voted out, their legal fees skyrocketed, and their clubhouse was demolished by court order. I watched with Deputy Mark as the wrecking crew tore it down, the white walls crumbling like their lies. "What a waste," a worker muttered. I didn't say a thing. Justice was louder than words. That same week, I got the Arizona State Veteran Impact Award. The ceremony in Phoenix was packed, but I kept it simple. Boomer and Ruger flanked me in their service vests, and when I took the mic, I said I didn't build this to fight. I built it to heal. But sometimes standing your ground is the healing. This land taught me that. My grandfather taught me that. Now we teach others. The crowd stood, some saluting, and for the first time in years, I felt peace. But the HOA hadn't learned. A week after the ceremony, I found an unsigned letter stuffed in my gate. "You will regret this. We are not done." Pure cowardice. I handed it to Mark, who shook his head. "They're desperate. Don't let it get to you." But I was ready. That night, headlights appeared again, not trouble, but a rusty pickup. A man stepped out, maybe 75, moving like he was 30. His cowboy hat dusty but proud. "Name's Hank Granger," he said, shaking my hand. "Your grandfather's cousin. Saw you on the news. Figured it was time to come home." We talked for hours, swapping stories, and he handed me a leather-bound journal, Grandpa's blueprints for the ranch, his vision for something bigger. The final entry read, "Build something greater than yourself. Make noise, but protect what's quiet and good." Under a sky thick with stars, I knew this wasn't the end. The HOA had tried to crush me, but they'd lit a fire that spread beyond Arizona. The center was growing, veterans were uniting, and communities were rallying. They'd fed a movement, and we were just getting started. This land, this legacy, was a promise to Grandpa, to every vet, to everyone who'd ever been told to back down. We'd keep building, keep fighting, keep healing. And the next time someone came for us, they'd find an army waiting. So here's the call. Stand tall, protect what's yours, and never let the Karens of the world dim your light. The Granger Veteran Training Resource Center isn't just a place. It's a beacon, a testament to grit and grace. Join us. Make noise. Make it count. The fight's not over, but the future? It's ours to shape.